You're listening to a CNA podcast.
Hi, it's Tiffany and Gerald on the Work It podcast. Now, a little story here. About 6 years ago, I had to clean up my resume because I was looking for a new job. At that time, I hadn't touched it in 8 years. So what did I do? I turned to Google for help. Now, this is what Google said to me. List your achievements from most recent and work backwards, highlighting any recommendations or awards you have won along the way. Then put your education background and list some skills you have which may be suitable for the job you're applying for. Now, by the time I was done, it was almost 3 pages long because everything felt important to me. Okay, I know this is where you will be shaking your head at me, Gerald.
Yeah. I think firstly, you have ChatGPT today. It's a lot easier now. It's a lot easier.
True.
But I think when it comes to resume writing, right, I think everyone can agree that they feel that their resume is always a work in progress. They don't feel that they have the perfect resume. There's always something to add, update, enhance in our resume where we want to apply for jobs, right? So I think most people want to put everything that they have inside.
Yeah.
And that's why you hit 3 pages or more very quickly. There's an art actually and a bit of science also as to how we should tailor our resumes a bit better so that it appeals to the recruiters, the hiring companies, to attract them to take a second look at what you've written on your resume and then call you in for an interview. I know this is something that's really on the top of many people's minds.
Yes.
People who are job seeking or even maybe not job seeking as well. How do you write a good resume and what to look out for? So I call in the big shot today, right? I'm really happy. We have Lim Zhirong, Master Professional at the Institute of HR Professionals to walk us through this thing about resumes and to give us some tips and hacks.
Yeah.
Welcome, Zhirong.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, Zhirong, give me a ballpark, right? How many resumes have you seen so far in your career? And in percentage terms, how many do you think are well written?
Wow, how many Probably over hundreds or close to 1,000. I mean, because I've worked in HR for close to 19 years by now.
Yeah.
And I would
Percentage
say
terms, how many are actually well written?
I like to be cautiously optimistic. So more than half would be well written.
Okay.
But these good ones, are they already, like they're fresh from the job portals or are they like already pre-screened?
Oh, you mean there's a difference?
Yeah, the ATS.
Yes, okay. Application tracking system.
software. Yeah.
So I would say in the earlier part of my career, I would screen every resume myself. Though now in the second part, I do have a team that helps me to pre-screen.
Now that you have heard what I did in the introduction, what's the good thing I did and what's the bad thing I did?
I think first of all, I want to start by saying a lot of people fall into the pitfall where, now I want to look for a job, I want to update my resume, and then they just build on what they have previously updated in the past. Like personally, I started my career in Temasek, then I would have a resume that wrote Temasek, then I move on to Unilever, I put on my resume experience on Unilever, and then I keep building on and on.
Yeah.
But the truth is, when we build on our resumes, we should also revisit the old parts and maybe refine it or even delete it or make it shorter. Rather than to take a very lazy approach like a Lego where you stack and end up you have your 3-page or your 4-page resume.
Yeah. Okay. So I should actually go back and then re-look at some parts and maybe shorten some things, maybe even delete some things, right?
Correct. Especially if some are highly operational and especially if you're applying for a much more senior role already. Let's say you're applying for a director role after 15 years of career. You don't need to to do campus recruitment, coordinating the logistics with the hotel. Yeah, you should delete that by now.
Okay. That's a good tip.
Can I give another tip too?
Yes, please do.
Sometimes people put their contact details under header and footer.
Okay.
So their name, their email address, their mobile number.
Then they
And
repeat
unfortunately, when it goes through ATS, the application tracking system, their contact details may not be captured because it's in the header field. So always put your contact details in the body of your resume. Yeah, in the header, it becomes very small and tiny.
I see.
And that might not be captured. Then if you got shortlisted, the ATS don't even have a contact details to contact you.
Oh my goodness, I didn't know
it
that.
could be seen as your resume is incomplete Yeah. So but why would people want to put that contact details in the header? It's
Because
they
you're
they
wasting
want it
space though.
Yeah, space is one thing. They also want it to be repeated on every page. They want it to be
Yes.
more visible, but actually, on the contrary, if software is involved, right, it could make you invisible.
Wow, that's like, okay, my mind is a little bit blown right now. I would probably have done and put it in the header because I want to maximize the page space.
That's right.
Right? Okay, so walk us through very quickly the entire process of recruitment from the time our resume is submitted into the job portal.
When it's in the job portal, then progressive company would have certain form of screening by picking up keywords first. Hence, that's why I advise job seekers to always include reasonable keyword. Don't include very bombastic one where you inflate your title so big that it's not so common out there. Make sure it's relevant to the job that you are applying. Another pro tip, look at the job description and look at the keywords in the JD and try to incorporate some of the keywords in the JD into your resume.
Okay.
And this way, it is more likely to be picked up by the system in the first stage of automated screening.
So should you copy and paste wholesale the keywords, or you should try and, I don't know, not plagiarize and use thesaurus?
Then when you copy and paste,
synonyms?
you're missing something. You missed out the parts to write down your impact at work. Because JD is usually listing the responsibility,
Okay.
help execute this event. But you wouldn't say execute this event and achieve a certain impact. And the second part has to come from your experience.
So resumes are really used at the beginning of the process, right? And the process starts with some form of screening. And if it's customized well, like what Zhirong was telling us, then your resume has a higher chance of moving on to the next stages. So what happens after the resume has been picked up, let's say?
Then usually the recruiter would do a phone screening in today's age, or maybe a video screening, which is now so common after COVID-19. Now after some sort of phone screening, usually we move into a physical interview where possible. Though unfortunately, I've still seen companies sticking to just video interviews throughout the whole selection process. I think that's the ease of convenience, and they also feel, I don't want you to come all the way down. Candidates love it, right? You don't have to take the half-day leave to go for an interview with Goldman Sachs.
Yeah.
Then call me old school, but I feel when the candidate meet the interviewer in person, you get the chance to size him or her up to, is this someone that I want to work with or work for? That you might not be able to tell so clearly over an interview, right? So treat interviews, even physical one, as a two-way courtship, where you're evaluating the company. Don't just go in to say, I need this job badly. I
Yeah.
need Goldman Sachs to love me and hire
I
me.
see. So I read that it takes a hiring manager on average 10 seconds to decide if the resume is in the accept pile or the reject stash. Okay, what do you first look at? If I were to put eye tracking software into your eyes, which content takes the most of your eye time?
I would say your most two recent jobs and your time in role. But I want to qualify that. First of all, it depends on the hiring company and the nature of the industry first. If you're a startup looking to hire, probably you wouldn't be so obsessed about the staying power of an individual, but rather you are more obsessed on, has this person done 0 to 1 work, the ability to do something from scratch and to scale it up.
Okay.
Versus if you are applying for a more traditional company, then the recruiter might value, did you spend 4 years in your last most recent gig, and your last second most recent gig, was it at least 3 years or so?
I see.
So I wouldn't say this is what I look for, but depending on the nature of the industry, the recruiters may look at it this way.
So they will still look at the first two jobs. It's just that maybe someone from a startup company might look at what you have achieved, whereas somebody who is in a bigger company, a legacy company,
May value
might value
longevity,
longevity. So they might be looking at the duration
And
of
anyway,
stay.
the first page is usually your last 2 gigs.
Exactly,
Yeah, it
correct.
should
But there's
be.
always the top part where you can write a short little bio of yourself.
Personally, I don't think it is necessary, but if you still want to include, I recommend keeping it to 2 to 3 sentences. Yeah, I've seen resumes where the personal bio was almost like 1/3
Half
of
of
the
the
first
page.
page. And all this personal bio is self-description of an individual, not substantiated by your achievement or impact at work. Depending on the interviewer or the screener who picked up your resume, he or she may believe or may not believe in it, right? Rather than going into the qualitative details.
I think Zhirong mentioned a very important principle, which is you need to create a resume that is reader friendly. So you need to put yourself in the shoes of the reader. What are they looking for? What will appeal to them in terms of keywords, in terms of what's important information for them to see about you, so that it makes the whole reading, the whole 10 seconds more worthwhile.
Yeah. Now, you talked about putting your contact details in the body. Now, what other things are necessary to put inside a resume?
I think one thing that I would personally recommend is start with the achievement that you have achieved in that company. Or when I was at Unilever, what was the top 2 achievement that I've done? So start with the achievement first, then followed by some of the tasks or the work that you have done in that gig. This way, your achievement steals the limelight and quickly sees their attention very quickly.
It catches your eye, right? Because you put numbers inside there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you qualify numbers, and it's a very nice, welcome distraction for your eyes.
Yeah,
it
there's
gives
not
your eyes
just
to
all words.
Yeah.
There could be some numbers peppered in there too.
If you just see a long essay, you feel like don't want to read it.
Yeah.
So when you put some nice words with not proper formatting, I think it sends certain signals to the reader.
What I'm getting so far from both of you is that it's a bit like storytelling. Right? Writing a resume is storytelling. So it depends on who your reader is. If I'm applying for a managerial position, then you want to put straight up that you have led teams of what sizes, you have led them to achieve certain transformations.
And that you can include in your 2 to 3 sentences a summary if
yes.
that is the intent.
Okay, what if though I am applying for a specialist role, but I don't want to put myself into a corner and say that this is what I'm good for. I want to open up the possibility of maybe down the road, you might want to consider me for a more managerial position because that means that I get promoted. What then should I focus in this resume?
You must remember the 3 E's, your experience, your exposure, and your education. The experience part, keep it 1 to 2 pages at max, I would feel. The exposure, what are the things you do outside work? Volunteering or even part of associations that you'll be very active in. And then lastly, your education, keep it short. Where did you graduate from, etc. And I think back to your point on that, your resume is supposed to land you an interview where possible. And once if you land the interview, then use that conversation to highlight your career aspirations, how you may or may not want to be only a specialist, and then probe the company if they provide that option and opportunity and pathway for you to pursue.
Okay, but be very honest with me. How many recruiters actually look at the volunteering part? Honestly, I think that volunteering part is a nice to have, and possibly people will put it in maybe if they are headed towards politics or they are headed towards, I don't know, like a director position, or they want to join some association, then they want to try to put everything in, shore it up, right? But how many recruiters or hiring managers actually look at the volunteering part, the exposure part, like you said?
I see. I think it has to go back to what are the companies that you're applying for, right? You want to work for a company that has a good purpose. I believe that companies with purpose last, brands with purpose grow, and people with purpose strives. And when you look at a good recruiter, when they look at the resume and look at that volunteering part or the exposure part, you get a sense of what drives this individual, what is his purpose in life, and then see if there's a marriage between his passion and what the company stands for.
Okay.
You know, this thing about what should I focus on in my resume, especially if today we have got a lot of good experiences and everything feels like it should be in there, right? I typically would advise us to take a look at, are you aware of this principle called the Gestalt principles?
No, tell us about
basically, it's a set of rules or laws, all right, principles that are developed to help people design better user experiences. It's meant to allow people to quickly understand complexity and make sense of complexity. So when I apply this Gestalt principles into resume, I treat the resume as a complex document, right? Just like how our careers are actually very complex. We've got many different experiences. We do many different things across many different jobs. And how do we quickly design our resume according to this principle so that people can still see and make sense very quickly, who am I? Across all these experiences. So if I use a metaphor, right, like fish bone and the meat around the bone, we can look like that very fat fish with a lot of meat, right? And that's what we want to look like. But at the end of the day, if we strip away the meat, what's the bone that's there, the core, which is what Zhirong, I guess, was also bringing up, right? That the essence of who you are, like why are you doing what you're doing, the purpose of your career. There's a narrative, a storytelling, like you said, right, that needs to come across. So how do we bring across this storytelling in our resume? We can design it according to Gestalt principles. And some of these principles are like, for example, putting in content, words, experiences at different places so that it signals certain things about you. And also, of course, things like less is more. You're right. You don't have to put everything. You put in the right thing so that people sense the right signal to their mind. And of course, I think one of the things that I would advise people to do is to test. So take your resume, give it to 5 different people and ask them what do they think you're trying to say in your resume.
Yeah.
So you want to give it to a range of people so that you can see that regardless of what experiences they're reading from, how are they perceiving you? Yeah.
Okay. What are some red flags in a resume that will make a recruiter like you toss it out?
Red flags. Maybe I'll answer it not from my perspective,
Okay.
but from how I know some recruiters they have told me.
Yeah, like an industry.
Industry. One of the very common ones would be, there's gap years in between jobs, and I'm really
So unaccounted
yeah,
for.
and I'm really against that though, and I feel very deeply passionate about this because in the 1980s, it is common for people to find a job and stay for 20 or 30 years. Whereas if you look at now, economic cycles are shorter, ups and downs are faster, layoffs are increasingly common. And I really believe layoff may not be an issue with the individual. It's just because of the business needs. And hence, I urge recruiters to not see gap years as a red flag, but normalize the gap periods. There could be people who took a gap period for housekeeping, caretaking, or really unfortunately went through a layoff. And I think it should be normalized and treated as common and not using the same yardstick like the 1980s where we want a continuous period of employment for 35 years.
Yeah,
I think those days is a little bit over.
Yeah. What about if you are reading the resume and you're very confused because this person, everything is just like a jumble of stuff.
Yeah. If you're working in a startup environment in a very cutthroat or hardcore industry, then maybe such a profile would be fascinating because you want innovation, creativity, and not be bounded by the traditional boundaries. So a good recruiter knows the company well to know how to hunt or look at resumes that may be suitable.
Now, when recruiters read resumes, because we're all humans, right? I'm sure there are bound to be subjective biases. Okay. So it could be maybe if you put an address in there, here in Singapore, it's very obvious, like which district you
Orchard
live.
Road or
Yeah, or you live in District 9, District 10. People automatically, like it or not, infer certain things, right, about you. So how can we work around them, knowing that the person who's going to be reading my resume might already infer some things about me?
So first of all, some tips. You as a candidate, then we should not over-include certain information. Like address, I don't think it is necessary. So some people may not realize you don't even really need to put the year of when you graduate from your school.
Okay.
You can graduate from the National University of Singapore or MIT, but you don't have to say 2007.
Okay, because automatically
You can
they
infer
know
that,
how
they can count
old
your
you
age.
are. Okay, but then do you put your secondary school, your junior college, your poly, that kind of stuff? Because people can, again, in Singapore, infer the route that you took and then extrapolate and say that, maybe you come from a certain SES, certain socio-economic strata.
And it's very true in resumes. I would see people putting secondary school when they come from the usual.
Yeah, the branded schools.
I mean, at least not in the recruiters that I've met and also as a HR professional. I've never let a secondary school, a branded one, influence if I was shortlisted you or not. I mean, not really. Yeah.
Okay.
I think it adds that little food for thought, a signal that affirms certain perceptions. But when it comes to really selecting, you're still going back to the experiences, the achievements, what you have done. I think those are more tangible things that recruiters would look out for. There was a situation where someone was applying for a job in Zhirong and they're staying in Pasir Ris. And then I think the recruiter just discounted the resume, saying that this person
Might be late for work or
might not last long.
Okay.
But what if this person has BTO at a flat near Boon Lay? You
Yeah,
never know,
yeah.
right?
Or drives like a BMW.
Or was taking a ride with the family car every day
Yes.
towards the west
Yeah,
side.
you cannot assume these things about people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then the other one is, of course, photographs. Photographs, right? Some people say you must put. For example, if you're applying for certain kinds of jobs, you should put a photograph. But I think by and large, if there's no need to, my own personal opinion is you shouldn't put. Because photographs are highly subjective. You could be too good looking. You could be not up to someone's expectations. And then you wasted that 10 seconds. Because the
Yeah.
person's mind is on the photograph instead of reading the other things.
But at which point can I inject my own personality into the resume? Because I've read resumes where I can sense this person is fun. Like there's a cheeky tone to it. Maybe it's like in the first 2 or 3 sentences. But how much is too much?
I've seen resumes in my career where they started putting for each competency 4 out of 5 stars, and then they colored their stars. So it looks so visual and it's very pretty. But the truth is, the ATS system is not going to be able to capture the stars that you colored in yellow, the 4 out of 5 for communication, the 5 out of 5 for empathy, and the 3 out of 5 for investment intelligence.
I totally agree with that. I would always advise people, don't bother putting that, because the reader cannot validate that rating that you give yourself.
That's true.
We always we
I
don't
would like
put,
to give myself 5 popcorns
we all want to
every
be
day.
5 stars all the way, right?
Yeah,
But then
100%.
because we Asians, we tend to downplay ourselves. Okay,
Not
we
me.
give 1 or 2 5, and then some 3, and then some 4. It's very arbitrary.
Yeah.
But it looks very pretty
Yes. It
though.
looks very
I mean,
pretty,
it is
yeah.
very pretty, but maybe it's suitable for the advertising industry. I'm not sure. I'm
yeah.
stereotyping here, but but who
Yeah.
knows?
I think those charts, right? They usually come in 1 pages,
Yes.
1 page resumes, right? I think those are really good if today you are out for networking.
Okay.
Yeah, if you're out for networking and you are meeting somebody for the first time and maybe finding out a little bit about the job, the person says, do you have something on hand to show me? And you straight away produce that out. And then very quickly at a glance, they can see that. And it doesn't become that arbitrary anymore because they have had a conversation with you.
Well, I think today you really, really gave us so many tips, so many hacks. I mean, I, for one, will be looking through my resume, not because I am job hunting, but I think it helps to consistently look at it so that when you really need it, you don't have to do this major overhaul. So thank you so much,
Thank
Zhirong,
you,
for
thank
your
you.
time and your expert advice.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Welcome back to our Ask Me Anything segment where Gerald and I take on a work-related question that you have sent to us. Now, today's question was sent in by a listener who I'll call Xavier. He says he's in his 20s and has just resigned from a job. Now, initially, he thought he was not the right person for the job. But after stating his intention to leave, and he told his manager, the interactions were a bit disappointing. Now, it sounded like Xavier was not sure whether he was set up for success in the first place. Okay, let me give you an example of what he said. I knew that I was the first official hire for the position, but I was also saddened to hear from my manager that they knew from the start that having a less experienced individual like myself was not going to work out, and that the higher-ups wanted someone like myself on board because I was much less experienced and therefore would not command as high a salary. Yeah, so Xavier is now searching for jobs, okay? And he wonders if he should disclose what he went through in his next job interview. If asked for his reasons for leaving, should he say what he went through? Will it hurt his chances of getting a job?
Wow. So sounds like there's actually a few things happening here, right?
Yeah.
The first one is, of course, Xavier and his feelings about how he has departed from the last job. And this has a lot to do with how he feels that he was set up for failure,
Yes.
right? I think it's probably quite confusing for Xavier because when you get into a job first and then you thought that you're the best person hired.
correct.
And in Xavier's case, he probably thought that was the case. And then when things didn't work out and he wanted to resign, and the boss told him, actually, we kind of know that you're going to fail.
Yeah, can you imagine someone
And
telling
we,
you that?
Yeah, and then we only got you in because, you were cheaper. Okay, so I can imagine Xavier now. We can imagine how it's very confusing for him,
Yes.
right? And this definitely would dent his confidence for the future job interviews, especially if he has to tell people like why he wanted to resign without a job.
Yes, correct, correct.
So I think this being a very confusing time for Xavier would probably need to find some closure
Okay.
or some way of thinking or reframing this situation so that it doesn't get carried forward to the future. I think there can be a lot of resentment, a lot of disappointment held with the previous job, and this can actually easily show in the next job. During the interview, when employers, the HR, right, they are sniffing for anything that is not proper, they will probe a little bit more, and then it gets out. So Xavier has to really come to terms with this situation first. If you were in Xavier's shoes, what would you do?
Yeah, you know what? It's true. The psychological part is going to be very difficult, but also at the same time, okay, I'm a very half glass full kind of person. So I think the first thing I would do after I have licked my wounds and tell myself it's not me, it's them.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the most
It's
important
not
thing.
me, it's them. I think it would be to also see that actually, even if I was the only person for that role, even though less experienced, cheap, but you know what? There must be something in me that the employer found that I was hireable.
Exactly.
Otherwise, they could have just kept the position open.
Yeah.
So maybe I would need to reflect back on all the things that I've done and ask myself, what is it that I can bring to the next job role? Are there transferable skills? Are there things that I would consider my strengths?
You brought up a really important point, right? That it's them, not you, and you were picked for the job as the best possible hire at that price.
At that point of time.
At that point of time. So I think these are positives, silver linings that Xavier can take along with him. I think Xavier has to remember that he was doing a job that was scoped to a higher level, more experience. He was trusted with kind of responsibility. And this is something that Xavier can probably take forward to the next employer to share that, you know what, I was doing a job that was for someone that was a lot more experienced. I learned a lot from it. I realized that I needed to find something else.
Yeah, and I can take on more. I've
Yes.
proven that I can take on more. So that's why I'm applying for this job.
Yes.
Okay.
I also like to think that from Xavier's perspective, why would the boss tell Xavier, this?
Yeah, why? That is such a low move.
Yeah, you don't know whether is it low move or could it be because they actually have quite an open relationship?
Okay,
Like
they
good
trust each
communication.
other.
Yeah, they trust each other to say.
the boss trusts him. I don't know whether
Yeah.
Xavier should trust him.
Correct. Could be the supervisor really said that to maybe make Xavier feel that it's not you, it's actually us. We did the mistake. So I'm trying to do something good by telling you that. But of course, it has the other unintended effect on Xavier, which is why Xavier wrote in. So I do think that open communication could be something that's also of a silver lining
Okay.
to show that, though things didn't work out, you still could get along with the people in your company.
Well, Xavier, I hope that your situation becomes better. And both of us are really sorry that you were put in this position. But like we have been talking about here, I think there are silver linings in this situation. You can use some of these as you approach your next job interview. Don't let this one setback affect you. So if, like Xavier, you have a work-related question, do write into us. We are at cnapodcasts@mediacorp.com.sg. We're also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Me Listen, and YouTube, where a video version of this is at. The team behind the Work It podcast is Junaini Johari, Joanne Chan, Saye Win, Alison Jenner, Shaza Dalilia, and Crispina Robert. Video by Hanida Amin.
I'm Gerald.
And I'm Tiffany. Have a great work week ahead, and don't let anybody tell you you are not good enough.